Okay, this tutorial is going to help you answer the task question down here, which is asking you to describe the pattern of global temperatures as shown by this graph over the last 140 years. Okay, now the idea of describing in geography is something we're going to come back to many times over the next 2 years as we go through the course. When you describe something, especially when you have a graph like we can see up here, it is important that you just tell what you can see in the graph, or you say what you see. You never give any reasons when you are describing, okay? If you were going to be giving reasons, you would be explaining. So in this tutorial, I'm going to just focus on describing. Now, with graphs like we can see above, up here, we can see a pattern of change, okay, or what you might call a trend. Okay, the graph is doing something. And at a very simple level, you will notice it is increasing from this point up to this point. And that is an overall increase across a period of time. But there is actually variations in this change. And that's what we are looking to describe, okay? So let's just have a little look at how we would approach at National 5 Geography describing a pattern of change, okay? First of all, we need to understand our graph, and that's kind of important because you're looking at your graph and you're thinking, right, what's it showing? Well, my graph is showing the average, the global average temperature from 1880 to the year 2020. So that's a 140-year time period, okay? And what it's showing us is that it starts down here in 1880 at about minus 0.1. Okay, now minus 0.1 is a bit misleading because that's not the actual temperature in 1880. And that's where you probably need to read this and make sure you understand this. So what we have done to create this graph is we have looked at the global average temperature across thousands of years of the planet's history, and we've created an average for that. And therefore, when we look at any individual year, like 1940, which is right there, we can see that in 1940 it was a little bit warmer than this global average. So here, this 0, and I'm just going to clear off the board for a second. This 0 line here is the global average across thousands of years. Okay? So let me just write that. That's the global average. When our temperature is above that, like it was in 1940, it is 0.2 above the global average. What we can then do is get the temperature every year from 1880, and by the temperature I mean is the overall average temperature of our planet, all the way to 2020, and for every year we can see was it above or below this global average. And that allows us to then see whether it's changing over a long period of time. So now that we've got a better understanding what this graph is showing us, let's just break this down. What would I be writing to answer this task? Okay, well, what you've got to do, and this is a strong common rule, is you must give key dates, you must give amounts from this axis here, and you must show overall patterns. Okay, you always tell me what the temperature is at the start. If, or whatever it is your graph is showing, how did it start? Well, let's just see how it started. Well, it started at just under 0. So it was about minus 0.1 in 1880. And that would be the very first thing I would write. Minus 0.1 in 1880. Now, what the temperature then did is we could talk about it going up and down, and up and down, and up and down, and up. But instead, we sort of pick a trend, a pattern. What we notice is the temperature dropped to about 1910, okay? So it was not continually dropping, but mainly it was dropping across this period of time, okay? So it decreased to minus 0.4 around about 1900. So we've covered, 1910, sorry. So we've covered about 30 years from here to here, okay? Now, what does the temperature do? When's the next period that we would probably want to discuss? Well, what we would then do is we'd talk about the increase from 1910, where we are, up to about, and you probably guessed it, up to about 1940. So what does it increase? Well, it increases from minus 0.4 in 1910 to 0.2 in 1940. What you could also say is actually that is a 0.6 degrees centigrade increase. That's a different way of saying the same thing. So from 1910, we're now up to 1940. So what happens now? Well, it kind of hovers around this 0.1, 0.2 until about 1980. So across the next 40 years, okay, it did go a little bit under that, around about the zero. Hovers around the zero, okay, you can see there, for the next 40 years, from about 1940 to 1980. And that's the next stage. The final stage I'd want to be describing is that from 1980, which seems to be quite a key date, there we are on the graph, it starts to increase, and it doesn't just increase, I would say that there is what we might call quite a rapid increase. And it increases from about 0 to about 1 degree in the year 2020. So that is a 1 degree increase from 1980 to the year 2020. So the next 40 years, we see that increase. So what have we actually done? Let's just do a review. We took this graph and we kind of broke it into segments, okay? We identified that overall, using the red line, there was a kind of a decrease between 1880 and 1910. And we gave the amounts going from about minus 0.1 down to about minus 0.4, or we could say a drop of minus 0.3. We then described that over the next 30 years, from 1910 to 1940, there was an increase from 0.4 to about 0.1, or we could say that was an increase of 0.5 over that 30-year period. What we then said is it drops slightly and steadies around about 0 from 1940 to 1980. And then we talked about rapid increase from 1980 to the year 2020, going from 0 to 1. Key thing is noticing the main stages, and we can see 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of key stages in these changes. We've given dates. We've always picked out the key dates of when things happen. And we've given the amounts using this axis. So this tutorial is your first example of how to describe patterns using graphs. You will use this skill many, many times in a range of different graphs.